Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. Welcome to the webinar today on a very interesting topic, digital onboarding and journeys, driving increased customer engagement. This webinar is hosted by IVS Intelligence and sponsored by Backbase. And we have today some very interesting panelists. And without much ado, why don't I start with a quick introduction to our panelists today. We have with us Nitin Bhargava. Nitin, as many of you know, is the Chief Operating Officer of Emirates Investment Bank, or EIB. Nitin comes with an illustrious career of 30 plus years, worked with Citi, Morgan Stanley, Barclays, JP Morgan, more recently, as we all know, at Mashrak as CIO. Nitin, we are looking forward to hearing from you on your experiences from across geographies. And it is also interesting to know that you have actually been conferred the Digital Transformation Leader Award and the CIO of the Year by IDC. So congratulations on that, and looking forward to a very engaged interaction with it.
Thank you, Ram. Thanks for the invitation, and I look forward to sharing thoughts and learning as
well. We also have our second panelist and very interesting, personality again on the panel today. Noman Rasheed. Noman, as we all know, is the head of IT at Dubai Islamic Bank. He and I go back many years, and he has actually worn various hats over the last 25 years, both IT and operations. And he always likes to actually talk about the transformation on both ends. And I think very, very engaged and interested to know what your thoughts there, Noman. I mean, experience from, again, Mashrak and Barclays for the region, incidentally, and more recently with Noor Bank. And what I really like about your tagline that I saw was about defining and executing transformation and digital strategies. What better than that, Noman, for a very engaged discussion? We're looking forward from you today.
Thank you, Ram. And I think I'm also looking forward to, I think one day, hopefully we'll be out of this virtual world and have physical panel discussions happening in a fresh air. But that's fine. For now, let's live with this.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wait for the day. And before I go to the third panelist, I do want to mention here that, this is a strange coincidence that we have. We have two leaders from the UAE market, both 5-letter words, starting with N, ending with N. One is DIB, one is EIB. I thought it was too much of a coincidence, and I was told that I should mention this to our audience, and I kept my promise, Noman. Moving on to the third panelist today, we have Saqib Khan. Saqib, as many of you know, heads the region for sales at Backbase. Saqib was, again, comes with experience with multiple organizations around the world. IBM, Temenos, Microsoft, and more recently, Network International. I got that right, Saqib?
Yes, you got it right.
And what I really loved about your tagline I saw in your profile there was building banks that people love. So, I thought that was quite interesting there. And again, we're talking about customer engagement, and we're talking about what people's love is all about. So let's see what we have in store. My name is Ram. I am a senior partner with Cedar, the parent firm of IVS Intelligence. I would be your moderator for the day today. And before I proceed further, let me give you a format of the day's discussion. We're going to start with a small poll, and we will have periodic polls. So I know it's the session post lunch, so you have to keep yourself awake. So we will get you to poll periodically. We will start with a small presentation from Backbase. And after that presentation, we would jump into a very interesting panel discussion with Nitin and Noman, and then we will then open it up for the audience to ask questions. So with that, let me start with my first poll for the day. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, start nodding. The panelists can also vote. And the question is, which of the following would you value the most in an onboarding experience? Is it the speed, reduced time to onboard? Is it the assistance you get, which is assisted onboarding? Is it the seamless experience, which is intuitive? Or is it about some innovation there, example, gamified experience? You have 20 more seconds to poll. And may I say that we actually have in our audience, as we speak, 125 people polling there. And that gives you a number of people watching this. And thank you for taking your time out to join this discussion. And we hope to keep our promise of keeping this entertained. Yeah. So I'm going to close this poll now, the last 10 seconds. And let's see. And the poll is done. What do we have? Well, the majority seems to be for an intuitive, seamless experience, but not very far away behind is faster and reduced time to onboard. So that sets the tone for what you may have to cover, Saqib. You know your. I leave the floor to you, and let's see what you have to tell us.
Fantastic. Thank you indeed, Ram. And I think this was a good start uh, through which we did a nice poll so that it also gives us customer feedback, which is one of the key ingredients in any success. And any organization, irrespective whether it is a software firm or a bank, we all live because of our customers, right? So I really like the way that you started the call with. So let me just start presenting my screen, and I'll be then getting into a very quick sort of thought around Backbase and our view. Just let me know once my screen is it's visible. Is it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you everybody in the call for giving us an opportunity here as the sponsors for this webinar being hosted by IBS, and an honor to have Noman and Nitin in this webinar. I'm definitely very pleased. I head the region for Backbase in the Middle East, and it's not going to be a really product driven session today, or what we do in the details, but it's primarily a bit on some of our findings when it comes to how you can increase customer engagement and what are the key ingredients and the recipe to make it happen. So let's start with that. I think the first thing that comes in that I'd like to position here is Backbase at a very high level. We as an organization, we take pride in saying that around 180 plus financial institutions are working with Backbase around the world. We're growing rapidly, but we're around 1,000-1,200 employee organization with 50% of our staff in R&D. And there are primarily three reasons why organizations would love to work with us. It's because we improve the omni-channel experience, seamless journeys, and also where they can have a quick time to market. So that's the promise we bring. From an industry recognition perspective, we have been in the category leader for almost all of the leaders once, likes of Forrester, Celent, OVM, and Gartner. Okay, in the local region, we work with around 9 banks. So these are the banks that we take pride who we're powering as their experience layer. So National Bank of Bahrain has in fact recently launched the experience on the Backbase platform in the context of retail. And if you perhaps have not looked at it, I would suggest that you do, please. It's a really nice seamless experience. They're onboarding a new retail customer in 5.7 seconds. 5 minutes and 7 seconds, which has really created a wow factor. Then we've got Kuwait International Bank, Capital Bank of Jordan. Another challenger bank that Backbase is also powering is Ila Bank in Bahrain, which is powered by Bank ABC. And then we've got Qatar Islamic Bank and Societe Generale Bank, etc. So what do we do? If there is one word that really explains Backbase in its truest form, it's the word engagement. And we are the engagement layer that typically sits on top of your, your legacy systems, like of your core banking or your card systems or other fintech partnerships that you would like to do. And within that platform, there are different layers that essentially work together to offer a very intuitive engagement customer experience. And this can be from onboarding all the way to servicing. So, if I have to put it in 3 buckets, it could be your onboarding experience, which has to be very fast, intuitive. Then this engagement aspect comes in where you are, engaged with the customer, how close you are. And then it is the servicing part of the customer where you as a bank can potentially help the customer through interactive chats or video calls, etc. Now, the question is, how can we increase customer engagement? And this is personally my favorite as well. If you look at it, and in order to really increase the customer engagement, from our perspective, it is very important that you go and listen to what the customers really want. That's exactly, Ram, what you did. You had a poll, and we found out some really key stats. So based on certain research, we found out that when you're opening in the context of personal banking, if you want to open up a new account, what are the two elements that we as human beings are looking at? It's essentially that you instantly apply and there is instant gratification. So the word I would like to emphasize instant here, because of the fact that the current customer behavior and the consumer behavior is demanding a lot of instant rewards. Everything has to be instant, right? So that's one of the key elements that we learned in terms of onboarding journeys. The other research we done, we found out that consumers are looking to get new products instantly and also get expert advice. So the banks, being experts in what they do banking, they also have to sort of, in our view, have to be digitally very close to the consumers where they can instantly offer advice. This could be in the form of nudges, this could be in the form of live chats, etc. So it takes us to a very important element in the whole cycle, which are key moments where you as a bank have to be very close to your customer. And these key moments are either break or break. These could be when you're onboarding a new customer, when somebody gets married, he or she is applying for a mortgage origination, somebody gets a kid in the family, so you want to have an insurance program, for example, or you as a corporate customer or a business customer, you're opening up a business account. So it's very important that at these moments of your customer's life cycle, you are there when they really need you, right? And that's where either you can make it or break it, and that's where you can increase the loyalty. How do you do that? Now the question is, how do you ensure that you are there when your customers really want, right? So from our perspective, with the Backbase engagement banking platform, which is a white label engagement platform, it gives you instant execution power. It is one platform where as an organization, as a financial institution, you can define your customer intuitive journeys. You can offer tailored experiences. The most important aspect is where your bank employees are also there on the same portal. Very similar to the concept of Uber. We all take Uber rides. You as a consumer are booking up a ride from the same platform, and so is the rider also using the same platform. So essentially, this is where banking will lead to in order to offer a very engaged customer experience. Having said this, moving forward, uh, you can also increase the customer experience by having fintech integrations, and banking services, if they are seen to some extent a very productized or a very, let's say, commoditized offering. Where do you create that extra edge, right? And that extra edge needs to be created when you embrace fintechs. So, for example, from our perspective in different lines of businesses, in the context of retail, you can power with the likes of Chimes, or what they've done is they have also embraced the different fintechs. Now, for example, in SMB banking, you can have your accounting systems well built in the mobile app, so that it is keeping your prospective and your existing customer very engaged. So these are some of the findings from a technology perspective that, if let's say implemented properly, can add a lot of value to your customers. The business impact is definitely high, and these numbers are from our existing customers. We see when you're investing in digital channels in the right manner, your acquisition costs can be 30% down. By offering a nice intuitive onboarding journey, onboard a new customer is also 18 times on average faster on the Backbase platform. And you can also cross sell and upsell very easily. And that if you quantify it, that essentially results in a very nice positive percentage. But this is from a customer point of view, right? But however, from the bank's perspective, we also see that in investing the right platform, you can definitely increase a lot of your processing cost. You're moving from a very legacy, paper-based driven model to a very digital model. So you find yourself that you're reducing drastically your costs. You can also find that your administrative and compliance activities become very, very fluid. And that's where you are essentially offering really nice engagement with your customer. So if I have to sort of put this in one slide from a Backbase perspective, what we can do is we definitely increase your customer experience by offering a really nice intuitive tool to do that. And by virtue of that fact, your costs can drastically be reduced because you're digitizing a lot of your processes. And at the end of the day, it is a better net profit for the bank eventually. And with this note, I think it is important to highlight that become the bank that people love, as you mentioned, Ram, is that where we can all go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Saqib. That was quite interesting. And I did notice that you kind of weaved in both those poll toppers saying that when you're intuitive, then you are naturally faster. So that was interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe before I jump into the panel discussion with Nitin and Noman, I would like to invite our audience to actually give their opinion on something which is a little more intriguing. And by the way, we now have about 161 people logged in. And we're going to have a very interesting poll here. And that is, who do you think should hold the primary ownership for the customer digital journey? Is it the chief digital officer? Is this just CIO? Is it the business or functional head? Or should it be the head of customer experience? I mean, unfortunately, all of the above is not an answer, nor is none of the above. So we will have to wait for what people say. And I'm interested to also know what people believe is the least of the four, right? Not just the most of the four. So let's see what the answers are. We have another 30 seconds to go. Maybe while we are waiting there, and I guess, isn't this a question that Noman and Nitin, if I can just open up for a small chat around this, isn't this a very commonly discussed topic in today's context?
From my side, I call it the most controversial question, which which comes at least my way very often. But yeah, I think this is one thing which is to be discussed, and I think I can already see how this topic is evolving and how it has evolved over the last few years. And we'll talk about this perhaps a bit more.
We will. Okay, so I'll just quickly end the poll and let's see what the answers are. Wow. We have 54% people voting for head of customer experience. And I think
I win the case, by the way.
All right. So that was quite interesting. And I'm now jumping to, what I would probably start with a question to you, Nitin, and then we would go through this, interesting conversation. But I'll probably start with what is the most topical that unfortunately has become the norm for any webinar post-COVID. So I have to ask you this question. What do you think, especially after post-COVID, has been the evolution of digital banking and more specifically digital onboarding? I mean, do you see differences across markets? You've seen things happening in this region, in the European region, in UK. I mean, you obviously you continue to watch what's happening around. So your take, Nitin.
I wish we were in actually post-COVID era. We're just waiting for it to happen, but we're in COVID era right now.
True, stand corrected.
And rightly so. I was holding it all later because I found it really heartening to hear even post-COVID somewhere, right? So having said that, this pandemic has definitely changed the business model that we are in today, and some of it permanently. So when you look at digital onboarding earlier in my previous organization, when we were doing it, it was more around onboarding a customer. And Saqib had just mentioned about the customer events journey as well. So it's not about just opening an account, which at least 3 years, 4 years back in my previous organization we were focusing on. It's also about the digital experience throughout the events in a customer's view. And I want to also highlight that it's not just, and when you think of digital, we normally think of retail customers or individuals, right? Or personal bank we talked about, but there is also people like me who are servicing institutions and large organizations, where the journey is a bit slower, probably because of trust. That you don't want to talk to a computer, you want to physically take a bundle of checks and process them and all that. So I did want to articulate a few things that I believe, how it is, and we can cover the regional and the international aspect as well. But what's happened in these times is that there has been more acceptance to the digital interactions, right? So I do believe there is lack of choice or whatever, we are building trust into these kind of channels. This is also with this comes the need for real-time information sharing. If customers need to know what happened, and I know when I was in a branch, customer will ask for a deposit, get a receipt, and keep asking at a trade side, has it been processed, the letter of credit or not? It's like instant information, and we have done a lot of things in the past where we are able to communicate to customers on near real time. So that with this kind of digitization, it's become even more accentuated. The third thing is around the self-service as well, right? All banks have been pushing for self-service, right? You look at the modernization of branches, lesser staff. You look at industries around, more self-service, less assisted service, and that I think is becoming more and more prevalent anytime, anywhere. So that is kind of the three S's. But the levers around this, right? What are the key levers that we have to keep the customer experience in mind, right? So I came probably the bottom in the two poles right now, because I don't know why I'm not probably as modern in thinking and all, but if you look at the customer experience, right? It has to be seamless, has to be fast, and we talked about that as well. But simpler the better, right? And it has to be fail-safe. So the biggest irritation that with not so much stable technology in the past was we would find errors and then we go back and we lose customers, right? It's like drop off, which hopefully now is with the resilient technology is getting better. Second key lever is we are just digitizing old processes. We have to rethink our operating processes. We have to, unfortunately, in banking sector, you have to keep the compliance, the regulations in mind, right? There's a lot of, footprint we need to capture from screening to KYC and know your customer and all that. But there is technology that are making it faster for us. Finally, information security aspect as well. When you ask for something digitally, the customers have to feel, especially again, I talk about the other end of spectrum, right? Institution, when they are sharing some of their confidential document, they have to feel secure that as it's traversing through cloud. I'm going to let the Noman talk about cloud later. I'm going to joke around we shared, but that's what it is. When we have to have that trust. I'm still battling the cloud migration with some of the people in the bank, right? And this has to be expunged from the, from this place, otherwise I'll get fired. So it's essential that the journey is taken in holistically rather than just in bits and parts. So as I also have a tagline for this, right? So on board and beyond.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Keep the customer experience right at the center, fail safe, reimagine the processes and information security. Quite interesting, Nitin. But I guess I'm going to go back to Noman on 2 points that Nitin talked about, which I guess are quite interesting. I want to take your views. One is about the whole experience between the retail or the individual and the institutional, right? Be it SME or corporate or commercial. I think, how do you see these two having evolved? And The second part, again, part B to the question, Noman, is this whole element of self-service, and you talked about real-time, information. There is a learnability to it, right? There's an awareness, there is an adaptability element to it, especially when it comes to self-service. How do you see this having evolved in, let's say, in the recent past? Yeah.
Right. So I think I'm just going to build upon what Nitin said and what Saqib was talking about. And I'll come to this segment topic you spoke about, individuals and corporates also, Ram. For sure, what COVID has done is three things, at least from the lens we look at, from industry lens. One, obviously the customers' expectations, paradigm shift has happened already. But the second interesting thing which has happened, I think, which is Nitin softly touched upon by using cloud as an example, is within the organization, how the internal stakeholders have actually shifted their own approach towards the acceptability of doing things digitally for customers. So that's the second part, or second important component or entity. And the third one is regulators, right? So regulators have also shown absolutely great flexibility of within the domain of accepting the culture of doing things digitally, right? And the classic example is digital contracts being acceptable now in the market. Now, when we talk about segments, very, very interesting behavior which we are observing in the industry. When you talk about corporates, those usual way of doing things, especially in the trade finance area, that every volume will come, every document will come through fax or physical. Now, same corporates are hungry for delivering these documents digitally. That's what COVID has taught them. More than banks, it has taught them. So it helps us as banks. Within the corporate domain, they have become very, very comfortable, even increasing their authorization limits within their online portals so that more of the transactions can happen within the digital space. That's one pattern we are seeing. SME, on the other hand, the guys who are always short on resources, on their cash positions, they are thoroughly riding this bandwagon of going digital because now banks are offering them services digitally, and most of them are freebies to them. So they are enjoying. So they actually took leverage and advantage of COVID situation. So that's also what we are observing. In case of individuals, I think individuals, the way we are seeing it is it's based on demographics. We are able to see different behaviors there. Demographics, if you put the age bracket, absolutely different behavior we are seeing where, these millennials to generation Y and Z are loving the onboarding experience end-to-end digital. They are hungry for it. But the other tail end, which is 55 plus customers who used to be traditional, right? I want to see the RM. I want to go in the branch. That's where I have a good coffee. COVID has also moved them into this direction, and I think that's the advantage to the bank as well. So that's to be honest, Ram, in short, the behavior we are seeing. The other byproduct of COVID, what we are witnessing as industry is COVID has actually added fuel to the fire of this competition, which is happening within the banks on digital transformation, right? And it has just given another boost to the transformation internally and externally. So that's another interesting observation. I'll stop here. The list goes on, but I'm going to just stop here.
This is very interesting. Yeah. I mean, firstly, if you look at change management, you talked about all three stakeholders. Your customers, their expectations are realigned. Your internal stakeholders are more willing to embrace digital, and the regulator obviously is an interesting comment you made. But I'm going to shift the gear to another topic. I'm going to Nitin, related but slightly different, right? I mean, if we were to look at the customer journey, and we are now talking about, as Norman talked about, we actually have the demographics and we have customer segments and different customer segments. What do you believe, Nitin, are the differentiators differentiators, right? I mean, what would be those specific nuances that you believe makes a customer journey really, differentiated or let's say successful, in the way you see it? Yeah.
So it's an insightful question. I think there's no straight answer or known answer, but I'll try to address it. And we have to go back, Ram, to the segments that we have to deal with. Again, the spectrum is from retail to corporate or whatever. And I was looking at it, first, common theme would be ease of use, right? Ability to use this channel with easy, simplified customer experience. And I've seen the journey where it was like a internal screen just digitized for customers, where you have drop down, page 7, page 8, and customer would lose it after some time. Things have changed now, right? It's more simplified. You can do it in steps. So important to have that. Omni-channel and persistent technologies are coming to like stop anytime and continue and all that as well. That is first theme of ease of use. Goes across most of the channels, I guess, right? The second important thing, and it's some companies have got it, some on the journey, is leverage the existing data and documents that we have. And I've seen in banks, we ask for the same document, right? My passport or Emirates ID or my, incorporation letter, even though we may have it somewhere. So our documentation or document vaults are not up to date. So that also frustrates the customer a bit. Right? And it happened to me today. I had to fill a form. I said, already have my documents in office itself, and you're asking again. So it happens, at all, internal and external. But if you look at the other interesting thing we picked up somewhere as well is for how do we incentivize? I've done that in the branch transformation in Mashreq. We are trying to figure out how do we promote self-service, right? So even it was more of ease of use to begin with, but I do feel when you're remote, not in branches and all that, how do I incentivize through either rewards, and I put in gamification as well in the first question. The reason being, if I can, and it can be a bit, I wouldn't say addictive, but something that can catch the fancy of a customer and they get incentives out of it to use this digital thing. I think it's a good thing. We talk about cashback, some coupons or whatever. That would be a way to differentiate as well and lower your cost in the end, right? So it gives that kind of spectrum to move from more passive to active. So in my view, that is few of the differentiators, and I don't think we are not doing it, but are we doing it with a deliberate strategy, and are we measuring the benefit of those digital channels? We do, but combined with these factors, I think analytics will play a big role in the behavioral analytics as we move forward in this. That would be the big thing and big change that's coming.
I'll come back to you, Nitin, on the measures, and I do certainly want to pick your brains on that. But there is something that you mentioned, I'll probably go back to Noman with, which is actually the element about the technology strategy, right? I mean, basically, Nitin talked about there are 3 elements that actually have to be critical in driving the journey. He talked about ease of use, leveraging existing data and documentation, and promoting self-service, right? Now, obviously, this is from a customer standpoint, it looks all easy, but behind the scene is where actually the heavy lifting is, right? So if I was to go to you, Noman, and say, look, with all that's happening around us, from a technology standpoint, in this context, what would be the factors to bear in mind when you're driving, let's say, a digital strategy or a technology strategy? Your take.
Right. So while you will insist, Noman, to focus only on technology, I think my answer would perhaps touch upon a few other areas as well. Because
please.
And that's only because Ram, the way things are moving forward, even technology looks at customer and customer experience as connected experience, right? So the word connected, which I think Saqib used as engaged, I call it connected experience, right? Connected experience from onboarding to servicing and the whole journey in between. So, and that's where I always value this as the internal organization value chain, where the implications and technology also play a role. What is the value chain? Its technology is on one end of that value chain. And then in between, you have sales processes, you have credit processes, you have risk, you have onboarding, all of these processes put together, right? So technology, if is at the one end or in the center of all of these processes. Now, COVID, onboarding, technology, implications, readiness of technology, the way I look at it is following. Agility will be has to happen at scale. Within technology, gone are the days when technology would receive a requirement, will reflect upon that requirement, take few days, and then revert back to our good customers. Gone are those days. It has to be instant. It has to be agile. So that's one really, really important change which we are seeing happening. The second extremely important change is to do with mindset, and I'll explain what I mean by this. The gone are the days when IT or technology used to enjoy doing 50 projects or 100 projects. Now the question is all about how many business value add initiative you guys are working on, right? That's a mindset shift. Each project transforms into business value add. COVID has taught us that, right? So that's another cultural change within technology, how to approach a business initiative. I think that's the other implication. There are a few givens. One of them I always focus on is the instant provisioning of infrastructure. That's super important within technology framework, and this is where I call the delivery folks on initiatives as those poor guys who are dependent on infrastructure. Infrastructure is taking their own sweet time. They talk to information security, they take on their sweet time. That game has to change if we have to be agile. Otherwise, we will just drag our businesses down and their agility will always go down. So speed matters, agility matters, and for that to happen, technology guys have to look after their own internal change management processes as well, Ram. I think that's super important. Now, for all that to happen, how do we make sure technology guys are ready is where I call some serious focus we as heads, as CIOs have to give towards making sure that the culture of within the organization, the culture of design thinking, the culture of ideation, the culture of innovation by investing in our colleagues and upgrading their skills at a scale, at a pace is super important nowadays. This is for survival. It's not just for even thriving, by the way, it's for survival. So these are the components of any, I'm representing a bank, so any bank's technology strategy. I think these are very, very important components of that. And I think my urge and my request to all those colleagues who are listening to us, and some of them I'm sure are from technology background or representing technologies, and if there are some CIOs also, by the way, on the call, my request to all of them is understand these implications. COVID has taught all of that to us, and react fast. If we don't, then my fear is we will become a typical head of IT operations, and that's all we will do in IT. And the rest will be done by somebody else on behalf of us. So watch out for that. That's my simple view, Ram, on this.
Give me advice, Noman. This is like, you're calling out on what actually is happening around us as we speak. And in fact, that is the whole angle to agility and the angle to speed to market is, I guess, can never be understated, right? I think this is clearly, and that brings me back again to Nitin, to the point you were making, right? Customer engagement models are changing, right? I mean, they aren't the way they were before, and we're seeing things changing significantly. So just as Noman was mentioning, the way we are operating, our mindsets are changing. so should the measures that are in place, both internal and external, in the way we are determining if we are doing the right thing or not, right? So your take on how this should be, I mean, how are we measuring now, but more importantly, how do you see this going forward? Yeah.
Yeah. Before I answer that, again, you're saving all the tough questions for me. I can see that. So, I want to go back to Noman's point around breaking the internal barriers as well. Just before I go to that, because the reason, I took my new role, it was like what you cook is what you consume. Deliver in technology, you have to operationalize it, right? And digitalize it as well, right? So that's the key norm where we are breaking barriers, agile, all those things. But it is a fact of our new life. So no order books anymore. Everyone is in the kitchen. Come out and dine together. And that's what's happening even in the large. I'm in the middle of a code upgrade, and we are going quasi-agile right now, not a waterfall. I just wanted to echo Noman's point, very important. Now, your question on measures. So that's another interesting thing, and I will probably have to leverage on my last experience, in my previous bank, because I was running the data program. The key thing is, how the analytics. So first is obviously, what I've seen is, and please keep me in range if I go off track a bit, but the main thing was not just availability of data, but it was about the accuracy of the data. Data cleansing is a big thing because we do have, when you have poor quality data, it's, garbage in, garbage out. So that would be the fundamental thing. Then you start looking at how do we create, a uniform golden data source which all parts of the bank consume and speak the same language, which is not always the case in most banks as well. Then you come to the visualization of the data, right? And then it's fine. It's every business can do it themselves. They're different, you've got OKRs, KPIs, measures, all those come in. We probably have our own measures and all that, but the key thing is beyond the measures go the insights, the analytics of, not just descriptive, but predictive analysis. And we did in my previous organization, we did an exercise, and it's going, must have gone live by now, I don't know, where we could look at the pattern of a customer's account and prompt the customer to say, listen, you normally have a standing instruction or payment out of so much, but this week you don't have enough funds. Would you like some help, or are you getting something? Like just proactively help the customers manage their accounts as well. So analytics is the big thing, touched on the cloud, but the big data that is coming in, the structured and unstructured data, the way we understand the customer behavior helps in digitization of our processes, the alerts, the assistance to our customers. That goes on to predictive, prescriptive, all those stuff as well, right? So point is, yes, we need a very strong data strategy. In my new role, the first thing we did was starting to put in the relevant dashboards, right? So not only just our operating dashboard, but also business dashboards. So now, exactly first of the month, we already got our new business dashboard. We got whatever the movements and whatever balance sheet kind of dashboards. I won't go so on and so forth. There are 3-4 meaningful dashboards, not overwhelmed by reams of papers and all that. Simplified ability to take decision kind of dashboards. So it's very important, Ram, that we do not overwhelm ourselves. And I've gone through the journey where we went overboard. 30 measures for a simple process won't help, right? And if I go back to my previous organizations, entire investment bank, like second largest investment bank, used only one measure in ONT, one KPI. I won't name that and all, but one measure. Every 2 weeks, what's the number? It was not profit and all, by the way, it was O&T department, but I'm just saying it's extremely simplified. And that's what we need to look at. How do I make it meaningful for the business leader? That was one of my things on ownership on the digitization. I think it has to be the business heads. And how do they drive their decision is by the simplified analytics that they get. Okay. With that, I take a pause.
I think that's Nitin. I guess if I distill what you said, I mean, I think there are three elements to this, right? I mean, maybe you've explained it in a very lucid fashion, but if I was to see a need for having the right data, it starts there. If I got you right, and you obviously have to have a very effective analytical process and engine to actually harness the data. But the essence of all of this you're saying is it's not about having the quantity of measures, but the quality of the measure on actually having the right measure in place, right? I mean, fascinating, Nitin. Thanks for that. Yeah. And before we end this panel discussion, I have reserved the last question for you, Noman. If you remember, we had this poll and there was a very interesting conclusion drawn about customer experience and CIO and chief digital officer. And we also have various other roles who are playing a very important role. We talked about, information security. We talked about engaging with regulatory compliances. So, I mean, in your take, how do you see the partnerships evolving? How do you see the working model, the way of working, the engagements, evolving in the next few years as we move through this journey here?
So I'll try to remain as non-controversial as possible while answering this question. All right. So let me make an attempt here. With all the hurt feelings as CIO or as head of technology, I'll say following, Ram. Few years back, meaning I'm talking about 10 to 15 years back, when business used to walk into technology offices with their requirements that they wanted something, we as technology heads used to take rest on our chairs and say, we will come back to you. It's very complex. It's going to take 6 months. It's going to take 8 months. And business used to walk out with a very sad face that, what, maybe it's very complex. So, we can't move forward without the help of technology. And then what happened was came smart consultants like yourself in the middle. And
the day is over.
And you educated business, right? So, and the knowledge economy, which played a very, very important role, where on a click of a button, business can figure out what is that they're asking for and what industry is talking about. And then when they're going to technology offices, they're going fully educated, right? And this is the time when our good friends like yourself and others told business, by the way, what, technology is in their own la-la lands, making it very complex for you. Take digital out, take data out, take information security out. And this is where you see the roles of CDOs, data officers and digital officers started coming, and technology offices only became a shell CIO offices. Again, COVID has changed that. The limelight has come again on technology. The pace of innovation has again brought the spotlight on technology. And this is where we should be taking this as a moment and fully maximize and leverage this moment by again demonstrating our values by becoming agile. Now, question about the synergies. I think there are fantastic opportunities for synergies between CIO offices and the digital offices and data offices. The fact of the matter is, whether it's digital, whether it's data, it all boils down to technology. And therefore, in my humble experience across different banks, I've always seen a soft, subtle friction between these 3 or 4 offices, always. That's a very, very healthy friction, because that creates the competition between these functions. The future prediction, if you ask me, I think I'm also seeing, and I think as a role you also play, sitting in the middle of the industries, is where there's a pivot happening, where the focus is shifting towards experience. And this is where we see the CXOs coming up. And I think one of your question, when I said that I won my case, when I saw the response, is where they said head of experience should own the journeys. And us and digital offices should be actually the architects behind the journeys. That's how I see the collaboration. And I think hopefully what goes around comes around. It's going to take a full complete circle, and hopefully we will see a lot of good collaborations happening between these offices around.
Very
That's
well.
my little humble.
Absolutely, Noman. I think that was, I think things are evolving, but as you rightly said, there is, I guess, necessity is always a mother of invention. So we obviously are moving in the direction. We do have the last 10 minutes reserved for audience to ask questions. There is a, there is a Q&A section below your panel who are in the audience. You could post your questions. If you would like to be posed to somebody specific, you could actually mention that in your question. As much as possible, you can refer your name and your organization. It helps instead of going anonymous. But before we let you ask some questions, we're going to ask you to give some answers on what you believe is your choice to the poll number 3. And let's have this poll before we start the next section. The most critical part of designing a customer journey, is it the accurate definition of the persona? Is it deep understanding on the voice of customer? Is it having a detailed compilation of user stories, or is it determining the accurate moments of truth? Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, all of the above is not a choice. So you will have to make which of this is the most critical. All of them are critical, I concede, but pick the one that you believe is the most critical. So while we have the audience polling some questions, we do see some questions on for the panelists. There are some questions there. If you want to choose to answer any of them live, you're more than welcome to, but the rest I will obviously pose for everyone to listen to us. Okay, so we come to the end of this poll, and let me publish the results of the poll. What do we have? Customer is king. Deep understanding on the voice of customer. I think I could see Saqib nodding his head, and I think that's the answer everybody will agree to. Sorry, is it visible now? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So with that, I'm going to jump to the last section of our panel today, which is questions from audience. So why don't I start with, I have some questions from Kaiser. He says, digital onboarding through banks are still not clear. Most of the compliance team don't give a go ahead on digital onboarding. They need to see a person and then take the signature for the KYC. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, or there is a follow on there. He says, regulation says it accepts current practice of banks digital onboarding, which requires ID cards to be authenticated. Most of the banks do it. So I don't know what the question is, but do you have a comment on this, Nitin or Noman?
So just to help the colleague who asked this question, so remember one thing, that yes, in banking industry, and by the way, our industry is perhaps the most regulated industry in the world, right? And why? Because we take care of the most important asset of a customer, which is the money. So I think let's establish that fact that regulators are there to help us, to help our customers and protect their interest. Now, it's all about the game of how you orchestrate your journey by satisfying the regulator need as well, and making sure that the customer experience is also not compromised. Example, and I think example from the industry is when we say take the ID as the evidence, therefore self-service cannot happen. There are examples in the market which I would like our colleagues to look at. Example in our own UAE market where no ID is accepted, account is all open. However, smartly, the ID is taken at the tail end of the process when customer is already onboarded and has had a glimpse of a fantastic experience of onboarding. And then at the end, the ID has to be submitted. So again, my submission is it's all about how smartly we design our journeys, keeping customer at the center of it. And I think even regulator will surely be able to support as long as we create the nice balance. That's my view.
Thank
around.
you.
Yeah, I think I would just want to add very quickly to that. Then I want to do a similar thing. There are ways to manage it.
Yeah.
Regulators are not looking for a sequence, and as Noman said, and we've done it in the past where we opened a inactive account, but the fulfillment process takes care of activating it and complying to the regulation. So there are ways to do this elegantly with improved customer experience. So I think Noman put it much better than I did, but I agree with that.
Got it, Nitin. In fact, there is a question from Fahd. Maybe Nitin, you could share your thoughts. What would be the points that banks should keep in mind while trying to offer quote unquote assisted digital transactions within their branches?
Okay, so this for me. So good. I leverage on my experience when we did the branch transformation. So the good thing is that customers are nowadays very savvy. If you look at this region, branches get more like representatives than actual customers most of the time. So educating them, light touch, but letting them learn is a key thing. And the technology today is safe enough, right? Not to be so that you don't break in, but I do feel assisted support is more to educate rather than to keep helping. Is my view.
Got it. So it's not a full-time, it's not an alternative to what otherwise has to be done, right? Yeah. Interesting. Saqib, there's a question for you. The question is, how easy and time consuming is integration of your platform with core systems on average? And what would be the typical or the largest pain points?
Thank you. So I'll keep it short. I think it is relatively very easy in terms of integrations with any other third-party softwares or any other third-party core banking systems. On average, we've seen a go-live timeline from 3 to 5 months. So, and areas where the bank has to be more prepared and readiness is on the infrastructure readiness and the IPs, APIs on the other side to be ready. So I hope that answers the question in the shortest form.
Thank you, Saqib. There's a question, Noman, from Harun Siddiqui, and this question is, in the future, with most customers moving to digital services, what would justify having a brick and mortar branch network? The most commonly asked question, I guess, keen to have your thoughts.
Yes. So branches, I think, Arun, are not going to disappear for sure. The purpose which they will serve will surely pivot from what they do today. Walk into certain branches in Singapore and you will experience it. Walk in some branches here, you will experience this. The purpose will change. Branches are very, very strong brand ambassadors of banks, right? So you walk on the street and you see a logo that just makes you feel that, hey, you know what, this is the bank I want to bank with or keep my money with. So purpose will change. These will become perhaps my humble view, and I think industry view also, which I always try to reconcile on and off, is this will become the place of building relationships and enriching relationships. That's what branches will do. You will have a coffee in the branch and you will walk out after having a fantastic conversation with your wealth manager, I think, or a CSR. They will do smart cross-sell to you without you realizing. This goes back to the smart use of data. And I think that's where I'll stop.
Branches aren't going away, yeah?
I want to add to that, if that's
Please.
so. I agree. And if you see, the modern branches have kind of started segregating transactions area from engagement areas. So, and the profile is moving from, like individual customers to, corporates or high net worth in a engagement area. And as Noman said, good coffee is always welcome, but it's also seriously, it is when I look at a brick and mortar, I feel that my money is secure, rather than just, a cloud bank where you don't know what happens, right? So that's kind of the trust, and banking is all about trust. So I do feel, even though you can see progressively branches are reducing, they are shrinking in size as well, but they exist for a specific purpose to have the confidence and trust and the high end of engagement as well.
Thank you, Nitin. We have last couple of minutes, so I'm going to keep this quick. There is an interesting question at the end of this panel. A question from Yasin. How do you really simplify customer experience and facilitate customer engagement? Wow, I think that was a googly at the end of the whole discussion. So, Nitin and Noman.
Okay, let me take that one.
And you want to give it a shot?
Time, like I can see that. Right? Just kidding. So see, again, I go back to one of the points I made. We focus on current processes and try to reduce the touch points. Try to rethink, right? And Noman had put it earlier as well, right, in the previous question, that you don't have to do everything by the book. That first give me the document, then I'll type it in and blah blah blah. No, you have to rethink. How do again go back to the type of segment you're dealing with, right? So it's not always one size fits all, and that's the problem in most of the software that we get today as well, right? Apart from Backbase, of course. But you need to just make sure that we configure our processes to the segment we're dealing with, and we make it so easy that they come back with more document rather than just saying, "Oh my God, this is too much." Right. So that's the way we have to rethink our processes. I know for a fact there are. In fact, even in my previous organization, we changed processes third time lucky to actually start going with the digital piece seamlessly.
And if I just summarize what Nitin is saying to the colleague who asked that question, the simplest way we can craft the fantastic journeys is talk to customers. Talk to customers, get their feedback, and embed that feedback into the journey design, and I think the magic will happen. We do the other way around. What we do is we put bank first in the middle and say what bank wants, and this is where we fail.
Very good. That's a good one. Very good one. I mean, the poll answer that we saw was almost aligned to what you just said, right? I mean, end of the day, it's the voice of customer. We actually are running out of time, so I'm going to take one last question, and there are two people who asked similar questions. I'll put this to the panel. One is from Dheeraj, who says, how do you foresee biometrics as a part of a customer digital onboarding process for payment authentication? Do you see the regulators allowing such seamless ecosystem? And there is another question from Tejas Harihar, and his question is, what's the panel's thought on digital onboarding for corporate account and merging with a quick data-based credit decisioning, working capital, OD, TL, etc.? Will you see this as a pull factor? I think he's talking, both of them talking about banking ecosystem integrating with third party and facilitating the whole journey for the customer. Your thoughts, Nitin and Noman, and of course Saqib.
Noman, I'll let you start.
So biometrics, not only biometrics and the whole partnership with the ecosystem. I'll give you a few examples which will give the comfort that it's happening, it's reality. Example number one, in corporate area, in SME area, now the governments as one of the ecosystem partner are actually becoming so aggressive of introducing digital means of delivering the experience to customers. I'll give you one simple example from this market itself is the Dubai Economic Department, right? And I know colleagues from perhaps across GCC and other countries have joined this call, but just one government entity who's actually asking all the businesses to submit their documents for renewal of their licenses digitally, and then connecting with banks to pass on that information to banks to have banks KYC information also real-time updated. A fantastic example of digital ecosystem partnering between B2B serving the C, which is the corporate customer here. On the biometrics front, I think it's already happening. It's a reality. Even the regulators are asking for a biometric-based authentication. Example, walk into any cash deposit machines and try to do anonymous cash deposit. Gone are the days. Now you have to insert the Emirates ID. In some cases, you have to put the fingerprint to authenticate yourself. And this is not just based on bank's requirement, but this is based on the regulator requirement. So these are realities. It's happening, and it's just for the sake of convenience for our customers and corporates as well. My simple view.
Thank you. Nitin, you want to say something?
Just to add, I think Noman talked about the collaboration. I think there's a blockchain technology coming in. There's monetization as well, from between banks and creating the ecosystem and a kind of a marketplace to supply the data or stuff as well. So I don't know if I'm asking the question directly or not, but that is coming through. And how does one help each other while getting paid for the effort that you're putting in as well? But if I'm collecting the documents from customer and spending money on Noman can take it from me at a fraction of a cost and save his time. So that kind of ecosystem is coming. The trust between banks is also getting established, in my view, and that's how you start changing the way we deal with customers as well.
Collaborative. And maybe Saqib, since you are a technology solution provider, how do you see this question from a solution provider's perspective?
Yes, I think it is all customer driven. From as a technology company, we embrace fintech partnerships, and that's why hence it is the platform era, where bank needs to deploy a platform which is interoperable and also easily that can talk to other fintech organizations, keeping the customer at the center.
Well, that was a good way to conclude this discussion. Keep the customer in the center. Nitin, Noman, Saqib, I can't thank you guys enough. It was one of the best, webinars I would have moderated. So insightful, so interactive. I'm sure the audience in the room are, feeling as bad as I am that we have to bring this curtains down here. But thank you once again for a very, very engaged conversation.